the object is local, and so there are many physical attacks which are also perpetrated on this kind of object. And so this is a list of, a non-exhaustive list of physical attacks. And there is one which is now very famous, which is the side-channel attack, side-channel analysis, also called passive attack, because it relies on observation of non-functional channels like the electromagnetic radiations when the processor is computing. And also we can observe the power, but also we can observe the time. And specifically when you use a processor with cache memories, you can observe the time to access the cache memory. Okay, another very famous type of fault, physical fault, is a fault injection attack, which is also called active attacks, when the goal is to disturb the computation in order to extract a secret, as the passive attack goal is mainly to extract sensitive information from the computation. And type of attack is hardware Trojan horse. This is, in fact, due to outsourcing the design or fabrication of the embedded system or the integrated circuit. So it comes from the fact you can easily insert a very small block of hardware inside your circuit. And this can make the circuit inoperative or controllable, or with a limited performance level, or and with leakage in order to extract sensitive information. And so you have classical attacks, which are reverse engineering attack, probing attacks, kind of thing. So you have a lot of threats concerning the embedded system. So what is the position of machine learning to enhance the security of embedded systems, and notably the physical attacks? So we can say first that machine learning is a very relevant tool for the security analysis. So first of all, before the final goal of the researcher and the designer of embedded system is to provide very robust system with a lot of protections. But before designing protections, we need to analyze the risk. We need to know the threat. And so machine learning can be a very powerful tool for that, in order to point out the weakness, the vulnerability of your system. But unfortunately, the dark side of machine learning here is that it can be also used by a potential attacker. Okay, second interest of machine learning is that you can detect abnormal situation, and so you can use intrusion detection system to highlight what is the weakness of a system. And so it's called IDS. IDS can be also computed by using machine learning algorithm. And so we can also monitor in real time. It's not only offline analysis like IDS, it could be also online. So in this case, it's real-time analysis, and so of the security. And also we can detect the presence of malevolent block class hardware Trojan horse in embedded system. I say hardware because we have also software, but it's here, so I will focus mainly on hardware Trojan horse. Okay, but the problem is that when you implement machine learning algorithm, which is rather complex, as we have seen with the talk of Sumanto, it's very complex algorithm. Sometimes we require a lot of computing power and time. And unfortunately, machine learning implementation can be also the target of physical attacks. Okay, so now I will present the interest, the impact of machine learning on two parts. First is how to take advantage of machine learning algorithm to enhance the security level. And second part is about the security of machine learning. So how the machine learning implementation can be attacked and also protected, because the final goal, as I said, is to propose protections to have a robust system. Okay, first of all, so I think I will present by examples. So the first example I will consider to understand what is the impact of machine learning for the security is the PUF. So what does PUF mean? PUF means physically unclonable function. So it's a physical function which is inside a system, inside the circuit. and the PUF will return the fingerprint of the device. So it's equivalent to have a serial number in a memory, in a non-volatile memory, but it's very secure because it's unclonable. It cannot be tampered and cloned. This is a very important property of the PUF. That's why it's very important primitive for security. So how the PUF is generated? The PUF is generated during the fabrication of circuit. Every circuit has the same blueprint, the same netlist. So it's not possible to differentiate one PUF to another if you consider two circuits. It's theoretically not possible to do that. And when you execute the PUF in each device, you have a unique identifier, a unique ID. So the uniqueness is a very important property of the PUF. And we can take advantage of the PUF for security reasons, and especially for authentication, for secure authentication and non-cryptographic authentication. So this is what is called the challenge response pair protocol, because the PUF can be sensitive to challenges, and the response is specific to the challenge. So the identifier, the fingerprint, if you prefer, is in this case the list of challenge response. Another way to use a PUF is to generate a single identifier, which can be used as a cryptographic key. But in this case, you need cryptographic protocol. The interest of challenge response pair protocol, that's non-cryptographic and very easy to implement. Okay, and now let's have a look at the most famous PUF, the Arbiter PUF, which is simply which consists in two identical delay. So the idea of the PUF, the source of the PUF comes from the slight modification which happens during the fabrication of the circuit, because it's very difficult to have exactly the same transistors. You have always slight modifications, and you have always Gaussian distributions to implement the doping of transistors, to implement, let's say, identical wires, kind of things. So the thickness of the insulation under the gate of the transistor, kind of thing. You have a lot of different differences coming from the fabrication, and how to exploit them. So this is a very famous schematics, very famous PUF, which is Arbiter PUF. So you have two identical delay lines, and they are fed by the same signal. So for instance, here you have signal at the input, which goes from 0 to 1. And so I have two delay lines. At the end, you have to measure what is the fastest one. So you have an arbitration and arbiter. And so this is very easy to construct a challenge response pair protocol on this Arbiter PUF. But unfortunately, it is attackable by machine learning. So it's easy to show that the PUF can be modeled by an almost linear model, which depends on the sum of small delay differences. And as if we use like logistic regression, it's very easy to attack. Okay, so it's in this case we have to devise a robust PUF. So a lot of PUF has been proposed to increase the robustness against the machine learning attack. So for instance, the feed-forward PUF at the bottom is merely a cascade of Arbiter PUF, and the output of the first one feeds the challenge bit of consecutive Arbiter PUF. A priori, it seems very interesting for security, but unfortunately, modeling attack, so attack based on machine learning, are very efficient. As you can see, you have a prediction rate of 99% by modeling the PUF, and you can get that in a few seconds, minutes, or few hours, but it's still reasonable time to attack. So machine learning is very powerful too. Okay, now the only way to protect against machine learning attack is to obfuscate and to code the challenge, or not to show the challenge, not to show the response, another possibility. But if you obfuscate the challenge, okay, the modeling attack based on machine learning doesn't work. So that's interesting result. But the attacker has a lot of power. Attacker can devise new attacks, still relying on machine learning, but with the combination of side channel attack. Because if you consider the arbiter-perf structure, you have at the output an arbitration part, which is a kind of latch memory element in electronics. And at the end, you have a flip-flop, which is to register the response and give it to the CPU. Okay, but if you consider the trace, the power consumption trace of this arbiter-perf, you can clearly see at the end of the trace you have a different waveform here. You have depending on the perf response. So, but this is a simulation without noise. Now, if you have noise, it becomes more complicated. Okay, now if we run machine learning attacks to recognize the perf response, so we have to train first on the reference perf. And in order to differentiate, to classify with supervised machine learning algorithm, if the response is 0 or 1, then you attack an unknown perf in order to know if the response is 0 or 1. So you can clearly see in the table, so especially on the right side of the table, that the attack accuracy is still very high with a very high level of noise. That means there is no necessity to preprocess the trace to reduce noise. So machine learning can work even if very high level of noise, and so and it's very efficient. And even if the perf is detected with obfuscated challenges, for instance, the attack is still possible. Then the conclusion is that we need to protect against both attacks, combination of attacks, machine learning and side channel attack. For instance, we can use two flip-flops in order to balance the power consumption. You can use also random initialization because the power consumption comes mainly from the rising edge and falling edge and CMOS technology. But we have still, so attacks still possible. We have recently shown that we have still attacks, machine learning attacks and side channel attacks, which exploits the imbalance between the two flip-flops here, for instance, and the difference between the rising and falling edge in this protection. So there's still potential attacks, but which many more traces for training. Okay, now let's go to a second example, which is hardware Trojan horse detection. Hardware Trojan horse is not a potential attack; it's a real attack, but for academics, we don't have so many examples because industrials which are attacked, they do not want to talk about that because it's a big problem for them. But sometimes in the media, we can see there are some hardware Trojan horsing which are detected. The most recent one is two years ago by Bloomberg. So a very small chip has been discovered in the PCB, in a printed circuit board for Cisco. But okay, but it's not only a potential attack, but it's very sensitive attack, and you have a lot of research in this field.
Jean-Luc, 5 more minutes.
How? 5 minutes? Okay. Yes. So so one way to protect is to detect by non-invasive techniques like machine learning techniques. So I will not detail the setup because, just briefly, in fact, describe the setup to prove impact of machine learning to detect hardware Trojan horses. So for instance here, so in this slide, you can see that you have two devices. On the left side, you have a non-infected device. And on the right side, you have an infected device by hardware Trojan. As you can see, the hardware Trojan horse is a very, very small block, in fact. So it's only the small red and blue points in the layout of the circuit here. But the effect is terrible for the computation. You can have a denial of service, or you can spy your information by using very small number of gates. Okay, now so this is slide to explain the methodology to attack by machine learning. But so the idea is to have two devices, one which is not infected, the other one which is infected, and you train by supervised machine learning algorithm. So, but before machine learning, you can use classical tests, which are rule-based tests, and you can specifically the t-test is very used for that, to detect a hardware Trojan. It's statistical test, and you can clearly see that the accuracy you got with t-test is it's very bad. It's less than 80%, and but also you have a lot of false positive. You have roughly 30% of false positive with 3 types of Trojan. The third type of Trojan, HT3, is very small Trojan, 0.1% of place in the circuit. But fortunately, as you can see, machine learning is very helpful to detect the Trojan. So you have an accuracy which is generally more than 80%, and you have the false positive rate, which is very, very low compared to the classical t-test analysis. And the same with the 4 types of supervised machine learning algorithm. So conclusion, so this machine learning algorithm is very, very powerful to help detecting hardware Trojan in a circuit. So, and finally, I would like to speak a bit about the security of machine learning by an example, which is convolutive neural network implementation. What you attack is not the algorithm, you attack the implementation and physical attacks. Okay, if you consider CNN, you have a lot of projects to have, because the protection, especially of the hyperparameters and parameters of the trained model, which is often patented and generally patented because it's a very complex algorithm, and it's very difficult to get a very efficient NN, I think. And so, but you need also to protect the input. So you need to protect the user privacy and also the output to prevent adversarial attacks. But unfortunately, the implementation of machine learning, as CNN in particular, is sensible to side channel attack, and more particularly the cache timing attack. So when CNN is implemented by software, so you have generally a cache to increase the level of computation. But a lot of cache timing attacks. For example, here, so you have an attack which relies on which is called flush and reload. So which relies on 2 processes: the normal process, which is the victim process, the target process, and the attacker process. So the 2 processes are running together in parallel. And if you flush, in gray area, if you flush before the machine learning computation, and the machine learning is performed at a specific address, which is a probe address. So you need to share a probe address, and the attacker process read again the cache. You can clearly see there will be a hit that will show that the victim has used the cache. But if the victim doesn't use the cache and doesn't execute at the probe address, you will get a miss in this case. So by just measuring the time, which represent either the hit or the miss, you can clearly see that the victim has used this probe address, which is sensitive address. Okay, now let's go back to computation of convolutional layers. So normally they are computed by using matrix multiplication, by using a specific library, which is GEM. And so, for example, this article dealing with cache, which is called cache telepathy, in fact, represent the way the convolutional layers are transformed into matrix multiplication. And by using the GEM library, we can see that in the algorithm, 3 functions are repeatedly used: the kernel function, itcopy function, and uncopy function. And they form specific patterns in the time according to the iteration type and the length of iteration. But by using the cache timing attack, you can clearly see this function and count the number of calls. You can consequently determine the number of layers, the input and the output, and filter size. So it's a very efficient attack, the side channel attack, against machine learning implementation and CNN implementation in particular. But fortunately, you have a lot of research to protect against this problem of attack of machine learning algorithm. Just now to conclude.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, the machine learning algorithm is provide a lot of powerful tools for security of embedded systems. Just to point out weaknesses, just to enhance the risk analysis. And specifically, we have seen the modeling and cloning, what is normally unclonable. We have seen by the example that there's no, so it's possible to detect abnormal behavior as those which are involved by hardware Trojan horse insertion in circuit. It's very active research area for IDS, specifically for autonomous car. But unfortunately, we have to care about the physical attacks concerning this the implementation, and so we have also to devise protections to thwart physical attacks and machine learning implementation. Okay, thank you for your attention, and I'm open for your questions.
Thank you, Jean-Luc. For the moment, no questions are in the question and answer block, but if anyone wants to ask a question, may raise his hand. You can raise your hand in the participant section. One question, Jean-Luc. I'm not sure. Let's come back to the PUF, the physically unclonable functions. How can you train your machine learning attack? I missed that point. I think it was slide number 8. Or...
Yes. Do you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Yes, I think you train just by simply injecting challenge and reading response. So you have a data set which is composed of challenge response pairs. In this case, yes.
How many challenge do you need?
You need, for instance, here it's indicated in the column CRPs.
Okay.
You can see clearly that if you have 640 challenge response pairs, you can get you can predict with a prediction rate of 95% the good response of the PUF. So that means you validate by using another challenge. Okay, it's not the same challenge that you use for training. And you need, you see, it's very fast. But it's okay. This paper is 7 years old, I think. So now you have it's even less now with the modern recent computers.
Okay. Are there any questions from anyone? It's 11 and 2 minutes. So if there are no more questions, and if everyone is comfortable with using embedded systems or machine learning systems after that talk, that's good. So thank you very much, Jean-Luc. We have planned to stop this first part of the morning session at 11 and to bring everyone to some rest, 15-minute rest. So we will start again the event at 11:15. The next talks, if I may say, will be on using optics and also electromagnetic waves. So you see that machine learning brings us to many unexpected features. The talks will be by Jan Frignac, Joe Viard, and Catherine Lepers. We start again in 15 minutes, so keep your computer on, and we will see you